Welcome to Wellness Warrior Adventures. Today we're going to be making spaghetti sauce and meatballs that are low carb and Yoli friendly. They're great as a snack or as a dinner item, and they can be frozen and microwaved for dinner on the spot. So as we get started, the first thing we want to do is get the sauce going. Getting the sauce going will allow us to have the sauce cooking while we make the meatballs. So here's the ingredients for the sauce. 4 28-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes, 2 12-ounce cans of tomato paste, 2 bay leaves, a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of crushed fennel. I like to actually run it through my spice grinder very quickly, not too much, just enough so it breaks up and begins to be fragrant. A teaspoon of leaf marjoram, a teaspoon of leaf oregano, and a half a teaspoon of leaf thyme. In addition, you're going to want to get 6 good-sized cloves of garlic and run them through a garlic press if you have one. If you don't, you can certainly crush them and chop them finely with a knife. Garlic press is just a little bit easier. So let's get the ingredients into a pot and start cooking. Once you get all these ingredients into the pot, you're going to want to stir it thoroughly. You should stir until you feel like you've dispersed all of the spices through the sauce, broken up the paste so that it's incorporated into the crushed tomatoes. When you see the thickness, you're going to understand why the Italians call spaghetti sauce gravy. There, that looks pretty good. And then you're going to want to turn it on to a low heat because you're going to want to let this simmer for quite some time. Add the lid and we're ready to start the meatballs. Okay, let's start making the meatballs. For the meatballs, you're going to need 4 pounds of Italian sausage. I really like the sausage that my local grocer makes. At Hy-Vee, they do their own seasoning, but find the one that you like best. 2 pounds of high quality ground beef. You don't want a lot of fat. I like to use the all natural version they have, which is antibiotic free. 3 slightly beaten eggs. 1 large onion chopped very finely. I'm going to show you a little chopping in a minute. And a good cup of parsley also chopped finely. And then you're going to want to mix the following spices together. 2 tablespoons of seasoned salt, a teaspoon of pepper, and a tablespoon of garlic powder. You want to mix those together really well. And the reason for that is you're going to want to evenly disperse these spices throughout the meat as you mix them in and make the meatballs. So it's really important that the spices get mixed really well together and dispersed evenly through the meat. So let's start by getting the meat into the pan. So we've got the meat in the pan, as you can see. You can tell the difference between the hamburger and the sausage. So our goal now is to get those really well incorporated. Because it's cold, I've found, and also just because it's easier when you're making the meatballs, that using just some ordinary latex gloves, so if my hands are wet, really helps in keeping your hands from freezing when you're trying to make the meatballs and mix the meat. Put these on. And start mixing. If you have kids that like to cook with you in the kitchen, I found that kids really like this particular activity because it's like meat Play-Doh. I liked really finely chopped onion in the meatballs. This is my method for chopping. Okay, so it takes a couple of minutes at least to get this thoroughly mixed. As you can see, you have just a very even mixture. It doesn't look like there's a large piece of hamburger anywhere. It looks more like the hamburger's sort of marbled throughout the sausage, and that's the look that you're going for. So now what we're gonna do is add in our other ingredients, but we need to do it a little bit at a time so we can incorporate them evenly through the mix. So I start with the spices. I'm going to do it in about thirds, a third of the spice each time. And I actually kind of use the folding method or kneading method that my grandmother used to, or taught me how to do to make bread when you're kneading bread. Get that last set in. Then we're going to add our onion. And our parsley. Again, it's going to take you a little bit. Just keep pushing and working the ingredients through the meat, because it's that well blended mixture that really, I think, makes the meatballs come out well. So you don't bite down and get a giant piece of onion or just a bite of hamburger. And then the last thing to put in is going to be our 3 slightly beaten eggs. And these really help the meatball hold together as it cooks. This is our binding agent. So as you see, we have no sugars, no breadcrumbs, but a lot of wonderful flavors in these meatballs. Being low carb, low sugar doesn't mean that you have to be low flavor. I think we've got this just about ready to make the meatballs. Okay, time to make the meatballs. I've already started here, but what you can see is I like to make meatballs that are slightly larger than a golf ball. The reason that I like that size is because when you bake them, you can cook them and they won't get dry. But make this meatballs the size that you like. So you're just gonna go in here, and again, I recommend the gloves, and get the amount of meat that you like. Now, remember, this time that you're making these meatballs is also a time to remix. So if you get going through there and you find a spot where you didn't get the seasoning through, or you see a big lump of the hamburger that didn't get mushed in correctly, well, go ahead and take your time to throw the stuff back in and mush it up. The great thing is you can see how well you've done, because you can see whether you have any lumps or if you've got even disbursement of your spices and your onions and your parsley. So just make those meatballs. And one of the things that we want to talk about is how do you tell when a meatball is done? And that is kind of an interesting thing to figure out. So it was actually Nisi Rowe who told me how to figure that out. The thing about meat, and when we look at these meatballs, we got one more to go here, made that one a little big, is when it's not cooked and you push on it with your finger, it leaves a dent. So let's look at that. So we have our meatballs. If I were to take my finger right now and push down on this, the dent stays, okay? When you cook them in the oven and they come out and you push down on them, there won't be a dent. It'll come back up, it'll spring back. So that's how I learned it, and it's been a pretty good test Over time, I also learned, kind of like for me, with the slightly larger than golf ball size meatball, it takes about 10 minutes on one side, one time turn, and then 10 minutes on the other side. So what I do is I start my oven to preheat at 350 degrees while I make the meatballs. And usually about the time I get done rolling them, the temperature's ready and we pop them in the oven. So here we go, 10 minutes, and then we'll turn them over. Okay, 10 minutes in, take a look at our meatballs. As you can see here, they're brown, but they're not browned. So I'm gonna switch the pan around front to back in the oven and put it in for another 5 minutes. All right, let's check these meatballs out. Okay, now you can see that they've started to brown, and that's what we want. So we're gonna turn them over. And stick them back in for another 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes are up. Meatballs out of the oven. So you can see they're very hot, so we're gonna let them cool for a few minutes and then we'll test them for doneness and get them in the sauce. Okay, our meatballs have cooled. They're warm, but they're not steamy anymore. So I'm gonna show you that test. So we push it, no dent, it springs right back. Once you know you've got that, then you're pretty good to go ahead and cut them. When you look inside, they're cooked all the way through. So that's really the test. Push it down, if it dents, put it back in the oven. If it doesn't, then cut it open and you can check one and taste it. Okay, so our meatballs are done and now we want to get them in the sauce. Now our sauce has been cooking and we're gonna want to put the meatballs in and let it cook another 10 or 15 minutes. And the reason is that lets the juice of the meatballs get into the sauce. Just really helps meld those flavors together. And I like to make a lot of this so that we can pre-package it for snacks and meals during the week. So I like to do a nice big pot. Okay, meatballs in, lid on, 15 minutes on simmer. Okay, meatballs and sauce are done. Whether you like to have them as a snack like this or put them into a larger meal with pasta and salad and those good things, I like to finish it off either way with some fresh grated Parmesan cheese. Meatball up, soak up the sauce, and build a perfect bite. Well, I hope you enjoyed this Wellness Warrior adventure in the kitchen. It's once again been fueled by Yoli, Yoli friendly food and a good time. That's what it's about.